First of all, again, just to say how happy I am that you're here and that we're able to see your film and have this conversation. I'm going to start by asking you a few questions, and then we'll open up to see if you have some questions as well. It's supposed to be quite informal. And I think, maybe to start, just congratulating you on the documentary. And I wanted to perhaps start from the end, close to the end. It wasn't the last sequence that you put in, but there is the breaking of the fourth wall and you coming in, sitting and talking to us directly, and that hadn't happened for the majority of the film, or the rest of the film documentary. And also, you were talking about something that I'm very curious to understand. When you arrived at that answer, it felt like it was something that maybe you carried throughout the making of the documentary, and at some point you were like, I know what it is. And more than that, you were like, I know what it is, and I feel like I need to somehow find a way to say it in the film. So could we start there?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you all. But a documentary is, by its nature, mostly or most times a film made in the editing room. And it's part of a job of doing a documentary to be like open to embrace whatever happens before your eyes, and like be able to shift your gears depending on what you're given to work with. Apart from that, the whole process through which the film was made was rather chaotic. The producer, Tiago himself, he's like, probably most of you don't know, Tiago is very well known in Portugal for what he does through a project of his called Música Portuguesa Acrescente Si Própria, which means Portuguese music liking itself. And so he's kind of like this producer, musician, artist, filmmaker. He's all over the place, and he's all over the place.
I think you can see that.
Yeah, he's all over the place in his own, and also in the way he addresses the project. So this all started with a call and him inviting me to come over and direct a documentary. And I kept on asking, but like, what documentary? Like, what we're talking about? Oh, we'll figure it out later. So only the day before the shoot was it that I actually sat him down. I was like, Tiago, I need to know what I'm doing tomorrow. And then we talked.
Did he tell you?
Sort of. Oh, this is about territory and people need to know what the territory is about. I was like, okay, fine, but what's the territory about? I don't know, but we need to figure it out. And that was it. And so, and we only had 8 days to shoot it all. So we were like running from, like one house to the other and meeting this person and that person. And that's also very much included in how the film was made. Like, it's all very handheld, and I was literally, me and the other camera operator, literally running after the people. But I guess that, like Hitchcock used to say that the form is the content. So to me, it makes perfect sense that in a way of, like depicting a territory, it needs to be chaotic, because like Albert says, it's all about hypertext, right? It's all about things that you would never imagine together being there and living together on that same place.
But when did you arrive at that conclusion?
Towards the end of the shooting. And then it became a question of how are we gonna portray this? To me, it was rather obvious that on the editing room, my job would be to kind of like put subjects together and kind of like trying to, like coming up with blocks that then I could edit together. But towards the end of it, I was just about to wrap it up, and I was kind of like, I feel like I need exactly to break that fourth wall, and I need to come up with an ending to it, a conclusion to it. And I guess it had to be through me.
My question is, how brave of a thing do you think it was? Like, have you done that in any of your other films before?
to break the fourth wall.
To put yourself in front of the camera and actually, to do that.
I've done it before in like shooting the crew behind it, and I've been I've been in some of those shots, but like coming up and sitting down and actually talking on camera, I hadn't.
But then it felt right, I guess, in a way when you did it.
Yeah, because to me, I don't see it as me on camera. By that time I put on my director hat and I said that I need a conclusion. It makes sense that whoever did this film comes up and talks about it. Just so happened that it's me, so I had to do it.
Okay. I'll leave it there. Maybe you have more questions about that. But I want to go back to something that you were saying around the structure of the documentary and how you put it together, because then you realized that the territory were the people, or else, otherwise you had 8 days of filming people anyway. So the story was going to be weaved through what they were telling you. But there is a clear structure. You use music, you use little vignettes to kind of to carry us along. And then there's these two characters, Alvaro and Tiago, who themselves could be just, they also carry us because they're so unique and so, unique is the word. I think so. There's also all these elements that keep us interested and keep us kind of going and wanting to know more. And is Alvaro going to go into another swimming pool somewhere, and or is he going to go into the water? And all those little things that you kind of get, and like Tiago wanting to connect with people in the way that he does. Did you find these little elements as you were filming? How did the structure come into your mind when you knew that you had all these talking heads? But you didn't want to just have one talking head up to the other.
Right. Yeah, the structure came in the editing room. Again, there was no structure in the beginning. All those events of Alvar going into swimming pools or climbing up trees, none of them were ever thought before. It was very much run and gun. It was kind of oh, there's a tree. What did I climb it? Oh, that's cool. Let's grab the camera and then we would do it. But it was very, very run and gun. And then again, when we got to the editing room, that was my main job was trying to come up with an order around the chaos. And one of the things I did was kind of look at it as if it was a song, and therefore I needed to have a sort of can't remember what's the name of it, that main riff that plays 2 or 3 times in the song. What's it called?
The chorus.
Yes. Exactly. And that's where that little piece of music kicked in, and I said, okay, fine, this could be used as a chorus that kind of allows me to jump from one to the other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One more question and then I'll open up, but it has to do with going back to you alluded a little bit to how the film came to be a film and how you were brought into this project, because it does feel like it's something bigger, wider than this documentary that we're just seeing. So could you talk a little bit about how it came together?
That's kind of one of the reasons why I usually say that I like the film, but I don't see it as my own, because I was called to do it and I had no clue what I was about to do up until the day before the shoot. And then again, even after doing it, I realized that this is a discussion that needs to be way broader. It should be extended to the whole country and not living in the realm of only these 4 cities. Because the way the film came to life was 4 municipalities that got together through an association and got funding from the EU. But what they had in mind was to do a sort of a touristic film, a feature film, but a touristic film that would talk about chanfana, which is a traditional dish of theirs. So they wanted to see goats in the wild and music and people cooking the chanfana, and then and then they wanted to have city mayors talking on camera, and I got fed up with it because I didn't want to do that. That was more of a commercial work and not a documentary. And you can see that the only person that is on camera, very much so a politician and very much so concerned about what's going to be on camera, is that the character, his name is Mario, that has an argument with Tiago about music. Yeah. And he goes on saying about how, like we have very different types of doing culture. We can outsource it, and then we have our own that we then export it. And the example he gives us is just like this lame, horrible theater/band. But that's pretty much the vision of culture that there is in a lot of municipalities in Portugal. Like they funded the film, but they were not really into watching the film. Even before the premiere, they were asking me, they wanted like an Excel spreadsheet with all the festivals that the film would go to and which awards the film would get. It's like, but it hasn't premiered yet. It's like, I have no clue.
What was the spreadsheet supposed to do for them?
Like it's that mentality of like, we pay an X amount for this.
Yes.
I couldn't care less about the film, but I want to have some things to, put on social media saying that Teatros da Chanfana won the award to so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
This is their mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually don't put money into culture. You put money into whatever reward the culture will give you.
Okay. We're getting now into the subject matter of the film, but I'm going to open up and hope that people will have a bit more questions about that, because that's really interesting. As a Portuguese person myself, it's like seeing this, it feels like a conversation that has happened for as long as I've lived, and I'm sure before that, in terms of how villages and rural areas are kind of like depleted of their population, and what is left and what is valued. And
right.
The value that it has versus the value that you put in moving to urban areas. And I'm sure, like in the Ibero-American documentary film festival, it's something that translates to a lot of countries in this area. So I'll leave it for now, and I'll open up to see if there are questions that want to add to this conversation.
So, as you said, the organization didn't like it, but what about the people? What did the people of these places think about, and the people that are showing the film? Is it what they were expecting?
It was more than what they were expecting, because like what they said was that for the first time they heard things that politically were not allowed to be said before. Well, not in like no one would get no one would be sent to jail because of it, but in no official institutional film would ever be allowed to say or show a certain amount of things. Like there's no more goats in the wild. So the cheese of Cavassal, which is an area that they're selling, it doesn't really exist. Like the cheese is not cheese of Cavassal, it's just a common cheese like any other. These are all things that you could never say before. Or at least not on camera, or at least not on a film that has been financed through them. So they were very happy. They were very, very happy. Well, some of them weren't, because some of them are part of the game. Like the clown that owns the circus museum, he didn't like it, because like he kept it like, we were talking with him and I was recording, and he was always telling me like, oh, this is off the record, this is off the record. Everything was off the record. Because he's a German guy that moved to Portugal, and he's kind of like always calling and trying to be in the political game to get a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. And he kept on saying on camera things like, and then he talks down on that, because like he got that school recovered from the city hall, and he got a little amount of money for it. But then he talks down on them because the money is enough, which I get, it's true that it is enough. But if you play the game, and if you go and play it with the same rules that they're giving you, it kind of like, it doesn't make much sense that then you keep on talking down on that. But apart from that guy and the politicians, everyone else liked it.
And do they actually want to open up to tourism?
Who, the people?
Yeah.
Well, the people are opening up to anything that brings or brings any sort of money, because it is true that the population-wise, from the 60s till now, they lost around 60% of the population, and there is nothing. There is really nothing. There's one of the interviewees, he was saying something which is actually true. With the money from the EU, we got like a lot of infrastructure to the inland, and we have swimming pools, and we have cultural centers, and we have all this and that, but we don't have people anymore. So before we had people, but we didn't have anything. Now we have everything, but there's no one there.
Any other questions that people might have?
I have.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. So, what do you think is the role of schools and education on this environment in Portugal?
Inland?
In order to, the genuine part of it, of the older generation have the genuine interpretation of tradition, and now how is the role of schools? Because actually what is happening is that there's no schools, so that's the reason there's no kids. If there's no kids, there's no development.
Yeah, but like one thing brings the other. There are no schools because before that there were less kids, and you had like schools running with only 2 or 3 kids. And so instead of the schools, they closed up a bunch of them, and they got like bus services, which are not ideal because like ideally the kid would have a school like 10 minutes walking from his place. But I understand that, it's not an easy situation. I think the role of schools obviously should be more active, but I don't even think that's a problem in the inland. I think that's a problem throughout the whole country. More so than schools disappearing, what I believe is a greater problem is that the role of the teacher has been, degrading for the past 20 years. And nowadays, what you see is that those who enroll to be a teacher are the ones that couldn't find or didn't have the grades to do what is it that they wanted to do, right? Because like the schools that get you a teacher job are the ones that have the lowest grades to get into.
Well, I think maybe a follow-up question, and I didn't want to start there because I didn't want it to be like a very negative kind of way of starting this conversation. But it was a lot around like, is there a sense of hope that it comes from the conversations, from the documentary, from there is a sense of pride. There is a sense of wanting to, definitely there is a very clear sense across the different characters of the value that they put in their own heritage and tradition, and the collective memory, the songs that are part of the all of those things. Of people continue to use their the wooden places where all of these things are still going on, even though there's an acknowledgement as well that they're disappearing. That it almost a feeling that when I disappear, it will disappear with me. So is there a sense of hope in terms of the direction of travel?
I think so. I think there's hope. I think there's hope mainly, I get that hope mainly from the fact that this topic is finally being debated.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about tradition, as Tiago says, well, he called his dog Tradition, and he says, see, tradition bites. This is the problem. Obviously, he's talking about the dog that just decided to bite him, but it also applies to tradition itself. Because one of the problems with tradition is when you put tradition, up there and it's untouchable. I'm pretty okay with, people will die and things will be made differently and things will be changed. And that's the only way actually to preserve things. Tradition cannot be seen as something like this is going to be untouched. This is the way we do a chair. We're going to keep on doing this chair over and over again. It's never going to change. No, tradition is something that is made in the present. More so than something that belongs to the past that we need to preserve. Because like in 20 years from now, our kids are going to be saying, oh, it used to be a tradition that every time someone had his birthday, the friends would congratulate them over Facebook, which is something that probably in 20 years doesn't even exist. So it becomes a tradition. But I think that, more and more that conversation is being, that debate is being, we're having that debate. And I think there is definitely hope that things can change.
It's interesting what you're saying, because I think Alvaro specifically talks a lot about that, and he's always kind of trying to contrast this idea of, he was talking about like what is it that is being done, or a village that is being preserved and becomes like this kind of almost like mausoleum of sorts, so that people can go and spend time there, but there's actually no internet connection, so then you're supposed to go there and experience something in a village shistu or whatever, but then at the same time you're supposed to now be outside of reality in a way, which is not how you live. So he tries, and I wonder how much of that it actually echoes, like the documentary premiere that Doc Lisboa and you've screened, how much of that conversation actually does land with people, or how much of a battle, an uphill battle it is with, I guess, like, for lack of another group, like the politicians who want to impose a certain narrative or a certain agenda.
Yeah, exactly. That's the debate, and that's the struggle here. You have a lot more people nowadays that understand that we need to move forward, and in order to move forward, things need to change, and we need to accept that change. Like the example of the schist villages. You still have a lot of people saying, "Oh yeah, but this is not preservation, because if we are to preserve it, the houses need to be used as they were used before, and we need to bring the cattle back and everything else." But who's willing to live in the middle of nowhere with no internet, with no nothing, and having to wake up every day at 4 to take the cattle out? And it's like, no one's willing to do that anymore. So exactly. So let's forget that idea, and as Albert says, very rightly so, let's give new use to the things of the past, but not like in this crystallized idea of tradition that is untouchable. Now the politicians, on the other hand, they're more concerned with generating money fast. And votes, basically. And all these ideas of changes are very difficult for them, because again, what is their comfort zone? They put money into a video that sells whatever touristic preconceived idea there is of the region. So there's this cheese, then there's going to be an old lady doing the cheese for you, someone's going to be, and it's kind of like, it's a make-believe kind of story, but for them it's very comfortable to do so. So that's where the struggle begins.
Go ahead.
It's okay. Yeah, maybe slightly shifting the subject.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I had a question about sound, because it seems like more than just a soundtrack. Sound kind of weaves throughout the documentary as both an important motif and kind of a way of practicing valuing community and memory. Really liked this shot of the guy in the Roman ruins kind of scratching the sand. That was very cool. So I was just wondering if you could talk more about the kind of the role of sound in politics and filmmaking and remembering things.
Yeah. That falls back to how it all began for me. I come from a music background, and so sound and music were always very important in my approach to film. And also it falls in line to the idea that I have of cinema. I've never seen it, to me personally, I've never seen it as the seventh art, as they call it. I see it as, like a medium that uses a lot of different techniques, but to me, it's a medium that serves a greater art, which is the art of telling stories, which is the first of them all. So to me, cinema is all of these things combined, and sound is just as important as music, that is just as important as the picture, that is just as important as everything else. So again, to me, it's definitely very, very important, and I love manipulating sound.
I guess one of the other, hearing you talk about how you see it, how you see documentary filmmaking and all of the different elements and how important they are, it makes me think again, going back to characters and just going back to the idea of having 8 days to form relationships and have people that are feeling comfortable enough to be vulnerable in front of the camera and to share things that they've carried with them for years, for decades, for most of their lives. Did you do some of that because you had such a limited amount of time? I think it's very unusual what you did.
Yeah.
So let's just acknowledge
Fortunately,
that.
yes.
It's very unusual for you to be able to do something like this and have such a short amount of time. Even to I was sitting and was thinking, oh, it must have been like a huge amount of research that you must have done. It's just like,
No.
you didn't, but Tiago, I guess, did some of that. So you're coming in as the director, like filming this, but actually you haven't had an opportunity to warm up to the subject yourself as someone who's behind the camera, but also how did then was it that Tiago became the intermediate in that?
In some cases, in others, no. But as a director, one of the things that I believe are part of the job is to be able to put on multiple hats. So, and it's kind of like performing in a way that makes people comfortable. And to do so, you need to be open to changing yourself constantly and also, have kind of like an intuition to whatever that person is or likes. So I very often behave in a way that I wouldn't behave at home just to make that person more comfortable, right? If I go to a bar to interview someone and I immediately understand that person is into football and beer, that's the first thing I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna sit, order a beer. So how's the fika? It's kind of like breaking the ice straight away. And kind of like building a bridge of communication that then allows me to go into more kind of like depth and other subjects. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But
yeah. Well, I guess that the times that it didn't work, you didn't put them in the film, so
no.
You made sure that they weren't there. So good job in terms of editing. I wonder if there are other burning questions. There's one from Mark.
No, one more question.
One more question and that's it. Oh wow. Okay. Well, I have one question. It's not the most elevated question ever, but I was curious about. Did you try the champagne and how does it taste like? Because you can just like show it and then.
Yeah, in 8 days I had to have champagne 7 days.
7 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I liked it, but then I didn't have champagne up until now because I had enough. No, I mean I like it. Yeah, I do like it. There's one better than others, obviously, but the ones that were really good, those were really, really good. And it's definitely a good dish. But again, and this is something that happens in Portugal with a lot of things, is kind of like making things into brands, making traditions into brands, because you get money from the European community to do so. And so they grab everything they can. Champagne was nothing. Well, champagne was obviously, it had always been a dish, but no one knew champagne up until 2 years ago. And then they made it into a brand. And now, champagne, the most marvelous thing is it's just a roast. It's like a goat roast. It's cool, I like it, but come on.
I think you can see that in the way that you've the way that people talk about it versus how much time you gave it in the
because they wanted to feature about champagne.
Okay, let's move on to something else.
Yeah, because they wanted to feature about champagne, but there's not that much to say about it. Isaura says it all. Well, I use this and this and this and that. We put it all in a pot. Done. That's it. That's not enough for a feature.
Yeah, no. That was. But still, I was curious about it because maybe I hadn't seen it before, and I think it's interesting. We'll wrap it up, but I think it's just interesting the amount of. There were so many different artisans. There's so many different professions. Some of them that I'm familiar with because they exist to this day, but there are some of them that are disappearing or have disappeared. And I think for me, that was definitely like a journey, a really beautiful journey of going into people's houses, minds, in studios, workplaces, and just kind of like having like opening that door, which is kind of what documentary does, what film does.
Yeah.
But that was just so not unexpected, but it's definitely something that you don't see every day. In the way that you did it. Like I said in the beginning, I think that there's something to be said about those two characters who they came and pestered you to do, Tiago, but I guess Alvaro as well, with his eccentric way of being. Kind of those are the two constants that kind of carry the film around, and like that bit of like those choruses of music that you have, they are also a bit of a chorus around the film. And then we're really open to then see what this person has to say, what this other person has to say. And then I guess in a way is what you do is like you create this landscape that is the territory, which is made of all these different people. So yeah, congratulations on having done that, because it becomes a classroom.
Yeah, because to me, it's how I say it in the film itself. Like territory. I think the other day we were watching another film from Brazil, and I think wasn't it you that was there that asked a question about maybe it wasn't you, but it looks familiar. But it was a film about a neighborhood called Alameda in Seville, and then at the end there was a question of something that I actually didn't realize up until the question was brought up, was, oh, you didn't have any shots of outside, like of the neighborhood itself. It was all centered on the people that lived there. And I understand for some people that might be important, but I didn't even notice it, because to me, you know, like a territory is all about the ones that live there. Apart from that, it's just landscape. Okay, well, some landscapes are better than others, obviously, but you know, it's completely depicted of meaning if you take the people out. So to do a depiction of a place, to me, it has to be through people.
I don't think I have anything else to add, because this was a beautiful way to close the circle and come back to it. You just did it beautifully there. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you everyone for staying. And congratulations to you for the film again. I hope it continues a beautiful journey. And as I said, this is the last screening for the Edinburgh version of the festival, but there's Glasgow and there's online, so go and check it out on the website. And have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.